here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's May 4th here in Seoul. I am Shin Yeun, and this is News Generation, where we make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Chizzy.
Good morning.
Good morning, and Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here.
All right, and both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. As usual, we'll start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. Now, the 2023 Met Gala has officially wrapped up at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. This year, attendees were asked to dress in honor of Karl Lagerfeld, the late designer who worked for premium brands like Chanel and Fendi. Numerous stars appeared, including K-pop girl group Blackpink's Jennie, and Jennie was one of Lagerfeld's last handpicked muses for Chanel. South Korean singer and actor Im Chang-jung has been accused of stock price manipulation along with SG Securities. Im is being accused of loaning money and even partnering with fraudsters who manipulated stock prices. Videos of Im attending investors' meetings and seemingly encouraging people to invest in SG Securities have gone viral, but he later said accusations were all wrong. He said he was a victim himself who suffered losses after investing. And last but not least, Chinese portal site Baidu has yet again claimed a Korean dish to be traditionally Chinese. This time, it claimed that samgyeopsal, a Korean-style pork belly barbecue, was a Chinese cuisine. Now, specifically using pork with green onion and wrapped in Chinese-style pancakes. Immediately, Korean professors Dok from Seoul University criticized China's deliberate actions to claim everything Korean as Chinese. Now we're going to take a closer look at the third news item. As we just mentioned, it's not the first time Chinese press wrongfully said a Korean dish was Chinese. Last year, some Chinese online users said Korea's kimchi came from China's pao chai. But kimchi is distinct based on how it's fermented in a breathable jar, the spices used, and how it's consumed. And there's just so many types of kimchi. Same goes for samgyeopsal. It's no exaggeration to call it the soul food of Korea, and the history behind this cuisine is actually quite short. People only started eating this type of 3 layers of fat pork with vegetables, or samjang, in the 1970s. In other words, it's relatively modern, but it's specifically a Korean dish. So here in the studio, we're going to be talking about this. Walter, what did you first think about when you heard this claim?
Well, I think this is absolutely silly, to be honest with you. I mean, samgyeopsal is a part of Korea's history. I think it is Korean itself. And this is not the first time China has obviously claimed things are theirs when they are actually our Korean heritage. Example, like you mentioned, kimchi. Also, the traditional Korean attire, hanbok. They said that was part of Chinese history, but this is just not right at all. This is our food, and this is the way it should be.
It's Korea's. Now, Professor Dok, who shared his scorn on social media, also went about saying that it's up to us Koreans who should take ownership and responsibility for what's rightfully ours. And if you think about the kimchi and pao chai debate, many Korean outlets and netizens went on to Baidu saying that you should stop making wrongful claims that pao chai or kimchi are even related, because kimchi is clearly Korea's. Then Baidu actually eventually put the post down saying that kimchi is Korean. Right. So would you like to see this type of action happen again for this samgyeopsal controversy?
Well, I have mixed thoughts about this. I feel like I do want to see these type of actions again. And back when there was the controversy over hanbok and the Chinese traditional clothes, you know, people, they uploaded their own kind of words about hanbok. They're saying that it's Korean on their social media platforms, and that went viral as well. I feel like that's kind of the role of social media platforms and online media outlets. But at the same time, I feel like we should just ignore them because if we give them a response, they'll hit us harder. You know, they might. You
feel like it's not even worth a reaction.
Exactly. It's not even worth the reaction. So we should just let them be, because people worldwide, they would already know that pork belly barbecue is Korean.
I mean, a lot of restaurants even call it Korean barbecue.
Exactly.
And you know what? I think that each culture should respect. I mean, there could be similarities in the sense that we're all a part of Asian culture, but we should respect each other's distinguished and distinctive culture for its traits. And that was our news feed for this Thursday. We're now going to move on to today's discussion topic. And tomorrow is Children's Day here in Korea. In light of this, we've chosen a related topic for our discussion. Take a look at the screen. Generation Alpha. They're actually who we should be referring to as kids these days. As children of millennials, Gen Alpha refers to those born after the year 2010. Experts are paying close attention to this generation because of how unique they are. That's mainly because they're kids of millennials, who are also characterized as being individualistic, having strong preferences, and being digital savvy. Then imagine what their kids would be like. Growing up under opinionated parents, Gen Alpha is considered to have distinct, strong tastes. They're also digital only because they've never come across analog tech. In light of Children's Day, NewsGen aims to answer 3 questions. 1. What are some key traits of Gen Alpha? How are they different from other generations? 2. How are millennials parenting their children? Any common traits? 3. How should society prepare for Gen Alpha to take bigger parts of the workforce and socioeconomic activity? So tomorrow is May 5th, Children's Day here in Korea. In other words, a day for all the Gen Alpha out there. And have you guys ever heard of this term Gen Alpha? Chihi here will explain what this age group is and which term it refers to.
Right, so Generation Alpha or Gen Alpha, it's a term used to describe the generation of people born between 2010 and 2025. So technically, they're still being born because we're only in 2023 right now. Right, and they're often linked with the millennials because most members of Gen Alpha, their parents are millennials like us, and they're mostly in their 30s. And Gen Alpha, like I said, they're technically still being born, right? So demographically, it's really hard to explain their generation and characterize them, although we're going to talk about it a little more in depth later on. So it's predicted that this Gen Alpha, they're going to make up a lot of the population in the near future as they're still being born.
Right. It's the latest generation.
That's right.
It's really kids these days. And here in the studio, we have Walter, a father of a Gen Alpha, right?
We do, yes. I mean, this will be my first time to celebrate Children's Day as a father.
Aww.
Although we're not going to be doing much because she's so young, all she'll be doing is just eating, sleeping, crying, and going to the bathroom. So that's how I'm going to celebrate my Children's Day. So it's not going to be fun for me for at least another couple of years. But I have also taught kindergarteners before, and I understand the importance that those children put on Children's Day. But it looks like tomorrow might rain, so it might dampen a few souls out there.
Right, and we were all kids once, so we all know how important Children's Day is, going out with your parents and having fun. But now, why don't we change gears and list a few traits of Gen Alpha? And Chihi, I know you have a chart prepared for us?
Right. So if we take a look at the screen together, we can see the different characteristics or traits of the different generations we know of, including Alpha Gen. Now, the Alpha Gen, Gen Alpha, they are the digital natives. They're very familiar with the use of AI and also screens because they've been using smartphones, tablets a lot. They're socially, psychologically more mature because they've been exposed to a lot of information. They have clear preference for things they like and dislike, and they tend to be self-centered. They see themselves as celebrities, and this is partly because of the parenting style, which we'll talk about later on as well. And because they were born in the low birth rate kind of period, they tend to be the only child in the family. So they grow up in a family culture that's pretty child-centered. And this is very different from the Generation X we see on the chart because they're not digital natives, but they had to kind of adjust to the different digital environment that they had to be exposed to. So we can see the different differences between the generations and their traits and characteristics.
It really made me smile when you said they think that
they're celebrities.
They think about themselves as celebrities.
Very cute.
As a millennial father, do you think your Gen Alpha child ticks any of the boxes over there?
Well, as I said, she's only 3 months, so I think there's a lot. Hopefully we don't put her in certain areas. Like, I don't want her to feel like that she's a celebrity. I mean, I want her to feel special, but she's, not above everybody. But there are other things as well. I think Gen Alphas are being more exposed to the concept of inclusivity, which is good these days. Being taught to be outspoken about more human rights, also talking about the environment, climate change, etc. I think this is great for that generation to learn because, as we know, the world is changing and we need to adapt to it. This generation could be the most educated generation compared to others, but The thing I don't really like is that I feel that, you know, a lot of the Gen Alphas are not playing by the rules, or, you know, their social media will rule their life.
Right, for sure. And I think this is partly because of who raises them. You know, Gen Alpha are raised by us millennials. So why don't we list down some key traits among millennial moms and dads, Chihi?
Right, so like I said earlier, most millennial parents, they tend to be in their 30s, and they have on average received higher education because they've had very supportive children, supportive parents.
Right.
Right, and they had this term back in the 20s. It was the term alpha girl or alpha women, and it referred to elite women who received a lot of education, so
Right.
they're really smart. But now those people, these women and their millennial women, they have become mothers
Yes.
of the Gen Alpha, and they're referred to as the super moms, really. And we know of these different mom communities.
Definitely.
We call
Online
them
communities.
online communities like mom cafe, and they tend to have a lot of influence
Right.
over where they're living, the community that they have. And so they really formed a completely different type of parent group, really, these millennials. But they tend to be a little bit selfish, and they think their child is very important. And so they do have some negative kind of view from the public as being too self-centered and too their own children-centered.
You mentioned a very interesting point. Though millennial moms and dads seems to be more digital savvy thanks to growing up as a digital native, they seem to be making a community of their own whilst putting their child first, and to the point where they step on other people's children, you know? And I think that's why some people actually call them like mamchung, like that's very bad slang there.
Yes.
But they refer to them as this monstrous type of mom that only takes care of his or her child.
Right.
Now, as a millennial dad then, Walter, do you think your parenting style differs from what we just mentioned right now and also previous generations?
Well, I can only go by my experiences because we can't really put parents under one area because we all teach our children differently. For my experience, as an example, my dad was very strict, very military style, you know, men don't cry, the alpha male sort of stuff. However, for me, I'm going to try and teach my child that it is okay to cry, although it's a daughter, so it's a little bit different. But I am going to try and take some mixtures from my parents' generation's teaching and also some of my own. I think some positives of our generation is that for more parents these days, as an example, let's use the word coming out, all right? Our parents' generation probably weren't as accepting as who we are as today, where we're a little bit more accepting, and therefore I think it will make it easier for people to be who they are. A negative, I think, and I could get heavily criticized for this, is that I think personally from what I've seen, we let our children get away with too much without giving them any discipline. When I say discipline, I don't mean hitting like the old days, but I do say like taking responsibility for their bad actions.
Right.
For sure, and a lot of millennials think like that way too, so that was a great point there. And we're now going to include an intergenerational diversity expert to find out more about millennial parents and their Gen Alpha kids. We're now going to include an intergenerational diversity expert. It's Henry Rose Lee, also the founder and director of Talentio Consultancy in England. Welcome, Henry.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so here in the studio, we listed out a few traits we found among Gen Alpha. And what did you think about our list? And what would you say is the biggest difference between Gen Alpha and previous generations?
Well, I did very much like your list, and I think I would agree with most of it. And I particularly liked your phrase, kids these days, because that is Gen Alpha, isn't it? I guess I would sum up the list with 8 of my own key words. And one of them is global. Gen Alpha have an opportunity with social media to become global, to see everything and get access to information. So yes, they're going to be better better informed, better educated. But also, I think the key thing about being global is that awareness that can make them appear more sophisticated and more grown up than they actually are. You talked about digital, they're always on, they're always connected. And it also means that they're going to be more mobile. They travel more because their millennial parents will have got them to travel more. They'll be more interested in things. They'll be more curious about the world. And they'll also try different things and may have a number of jobs. I think this social, always connected, they're always online, always on their social media. I can give you some UK statistics. If we take the oldest of the Generation Alpha, who would be about 13 now, about 90% of them in the UK already have a smartphone and are on social media. They're also very visual. So again, if I take the UK, about 80% of the oldest Gen Alpha are already watching asynchronous television and videos and films. And about 80% of them are also playing video games. So the other thing that I liked is when you talked about them being very individualized, and I would add that word as personalized. They want what they want when they want it in the way that they want it. So they use social media and smartphones and information online as a way to be entertained, to be informed, to learn, to navigate, to interact with people, to communicate. And all of that means that it's very much kind of always switched on, and always connected to something. And that can be good, but it can also be bad. As for the biggest differences, I think, between Generation Alpha and their millennial parents, is that it's that word hyper. So the Generation Alpha child is more hyper connected, and they're also uniquely more entrepreneurial, because as social media has grown up, what we've seen is that young children are now going into their schools and selling their toys and selling their clothes, or it's no longer swapping things. They're actually making money online because social media has told them they can do this, and they start from a very young age. The second thing is although they're very sophisticated in their information and in their education and their ability to be curious and see things in the world and be more inclusive and tolerant, they're also growing up more slowly. So we've got statistics that we believe will show that Generation Alpha, as they grow up, will get married later, they'll have children later, they'll leave home and their parents later. And I guess the final thing and the most worrying thing about Generation Alpha is we're starting to see across the world that Generation Alpha are getting more overweight because they're sitting down more. So they're more sedentary. And for example, again, giving you UK statistics, our youngest Generation Alpha, about 15% of them are already obese.
Right.
And our oldest Generation Alpha, about 25% already obese. Now, that's not the same in every country, but we're seeing them sitting down more, having less exercise, more on their devices, and putting on more weight. So those are unique.
Those are very unique key traits based on the different environment they've grown up. And I would like to ask you the last question then. Then what do you think are the key traits behind millennials and their parenting? I mean, because Gen Alpha has only grown up thanks to their millennial parents, right?
Yes, absolutely. I think there are two things we need to talk about. One is millennial parents obviously are going to have a huge influence on their children, but also we need to recognize that global social media also has an influence on children. And if you are probably around 7 or 8 years old when you get online, you're not supposed to. Legally, in many countries, you're not supposed to get online and have social media until you're 13. But we find that most kids get on by 7 or 8 years old. So social media has a massive influence on your life. And what you'll find is that social media says you can do anything, you can go anywhere, you can be anyone, which we as adults know is not true, but that's what children will believe. The second thing that happens with social media is that it can make people feel that they're not enough. So children are already looking at themselves and feeling stressed because they're not beautiful enough, they're not clever enough, they're not successful enough as children. And finally, social media can make them think they're not loved. They didn't get enough fans or followers or clicks. And so it isn't just millennial parents that are bringing up children, social media is as well. But if we talk about millennial parents, I guess some of the key traits are, you've talked about already, they're into their technology and into their social media because that's how they have grown up. So they weren't born with it, but they adopted it very quickly, and that's going to
Right.
have an impact.
It's the
So they like the
combination
technology.
Right,
Yes,
it's the
a combination.
combination of millennial parenting and social media. Thank you so much, Henry. You've given us a lot of insight on this topic matter. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, and we're going to now move on to what our global viewers had to say about today's topic. And we asked what they thought were the main traits of Gen Alpha. So if you take a look at the screen, iMain8092 said some of my friends are already parents, and I noticed that both generations are more inclined to do soft parenting and give their kids the chance to express themselves, which is great. However, it seems that Gen Z has a problem with exposing their infants to electronic gadgets and the internet. It's very interesting because we focused on millennials, but iMain also talked about Gen Z parents. Tiras Bell says none of my friends have children yet, but I do see differences in parenting, like less strict parenting. Also, in the reduction of corporal punishment, which is in certain cases is considered as child abuse. Last but not least, Hussein Demir said some of my middle and high school friends became parents in the past few years. I'm not in contact with them anymore, but I see Gen Z spending more time with their kids and valuing their time together more than any other generation. You know what? I think our viewers gave us more insight as to what Gen Z parents are offering to the table, and I think millennials and Gen Z are closely knitted together like that. Then my last question for the both of you is, what do you guys think is the best way to raise kids these days?
Well, I feel like kids these days, because they have millennial parents, they're less disciplined. That's why they tend to be self-centered. But as Henry said, social media is also raising the kids
Right.
as well, which is not only having positive influence on them, but also negative influence because it's lowering their self-esteem and they have psychological effects as well. So I feel like parents should reduce the screen time for the children
Right.
so that it has a more positive effect on them and they can learn the things that they can't learn through online platforms.
For sure. And Walter?
Well, obviously, I'm very worried about this whole online situation. I want my daughter to be exposed in the right way to social media. So I've got to figure out a way where that's healthy yet educational in the same way. But for me, I'm going to raise my daughter as long, to be very nice, happy, and understanding about the world.
And I think it always comes down to communication, better communicating with the child, seeing what the child wants, and also communicating with the older generations, seeing what we can learn from them. All right, now we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Choi Ji-hee
Thank you, Anne.
and Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here.
And thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you next week. We are
News Generation.